Welcome. Tonight you're going to drift back, far back, to the age of togas, aqueducts and marble columns. But not to admire them. Not to walk in the sandals of senators, philosophers or generals. No, tonight, imagine yourself as someone with no name on any record, no voice in any courtroom, and no protection under any law, a Roman slave. You spend your days in silence, your nights in a cold room that isn't yours. You wake up early, and you don't stop working until someone tells you to. You don't eat unless someone lets you, and if you collapse, the work does not. The Roman Empire, for all its marble splendour and philosophical musings, was built on backs like yours. In this journey, we won't focus on battles or emperors. We'll drift into quieter places, muddy courtyards, smoky kitchens, sun-scorched vineyards, and the cramped quarters of those whose names history rarely preserved. So settle in. Let your mind slow. Let your breath follow the rhythm of the past. And imagine yourself waking up as a Roman slave. The air is still dark when you're shaken awake. There's no rooster crowing, no gentle sunrise, just a boot step or a muttered command in Latin. You rise from a straw mat in the corner of a storeroom or a barracks. There is no blanket. The stone beneath your body is cold. You move quickly, not out of energy but fear. Hesitation earns punishment. You've learned that already. If you're a household slave, you begin your day cleaning before your master or mistress ever stirs, scrubbing tiled floors with rough cloth, carrying water from the cistern, lighting fires in the kitchen. There is little conversation, only orders barked in tones that imply you're not expected to reply. Field slaves begin earlier still. They trudge out in small groups while the stars still glint overhead, tools in hand, barefoot often. They move toward olive groves, vineyards or wheat fields. The work is repetitive, and that is by design. Dig, plant, water, harvest, repeat. All of it under the watchful eye of a foreman, often another slave, but one allowed a whip. If you work in a mine, the day begins and ends in darkness. Some of those slaves never see the sun for weeks. The air down there is stale and filled with dust. Children, too, are used here, crawling into spaces grown men cannot fit. There is a rhythm to it all, a cruel mechanical rhythm. Your body knows it even if your mind drifts. At mid-morning there may be a brief pause to eat, if you're lucky, a crust of bread, a ladle of porridge, sometimes olives, rarely meat. The food is designed to sustain you just enough to work another stretch, not to enjoy. Hunger is constant. You may forget what it feels like to feel full. If you're a domestic slave, your work might seem gentler on the surface. You polish silver. You bathe your master's children. You assist your mistress in dressing, arranging her jewellery, brushing her hair. But here too there is no affection. You're expected to be invisible and perfect. Any mistake, torn fabric, spilled wine, a misplaced comb can lead to humiliation or worse. Some tasks are humiliating by nature. There are slaves who empty chamber pots, who wash clothes in freezing water, who carry their master's litter through the streets while enduring jeers from bystanders. There are slaves who are required to laugh at jokes or cry on command. Some are forced to perform in public spaces, in degrading spectacles, for entertainment. And always there is the fear. Fear of being sold, fear of being punished, fear of the lash, or chains, or being sent to the mines. You have no legal recourse, no right to marry, own property, or refuse commands. Your body is not your own. You are, in every legal sense, a thing. The punishments vary. A missed chore might earn you extra work. A perceived insult might mean a beating, an attempt to escape, branding, mutilation, crucifixion. Runaway slaves were hunted, often by dogs, their bodies left displayed as warnings. Still, many do try, and some succeed, though we rarely hear their names. As evening approaches, the work doesn't always end. You might serve at dinner, refilling wine, clearing dishes, kneeling by a brazier to stoke the coals. Senators and merchants dine late. Their comfort is your labour. Eventually you return to that same mat, that same cold room. No one thanks you. No one speaks to you unless you're needed again. You lie in silence, body aching, eyes heavy. But your mind does not always rest. You think of another morning only hours away. There are different kinds of slavery in Rome. Not all are the same. Some household slaves grow old with the same family. Some are manumitted, granted freedom in a legal ceremony, becoming liberty. But this is rare. And it is never guaranteed. Most remain what they are until they die. Women suffer in ways different, though no less brutal. They clean, cook, bear children, and are often used for their bodies in ways the records euphemize or ignore entirely. Children too are not spared. Some are born into slavery, others are abandoned or sold. They are trained young to be obedient, useful, invisible. The days blur, one into the next, tasks repeated until the hands move from memory alone. And yet, even in these conditions, some find ways to hold on to something. A quiet song while working, a shared loaf of bread, a whispered joke, the comfort of another's presence in the dark. Slavery in Rome is not an anomaly, it is the foundation. A third, maybe even half, of the population in some cities are enslaved. The economy depends on it. The streets are swept, the temples cleaned, the villas managed, all by hands that are never paid, never named in stone. And so, as you drift deeper into sleep, imagine those hands scrubbing floors that will never be theirs, carrying water to bathe others, sewing tunics they will never wear, preparing feasts they will never taste. That was a day in the life of a Roman slave, and it begins again tomorrow. Now let the rhythm of history shift, just slightly. You've drifted through a day in silence and servitude. Let us now follow a thread of rebellion, not fiery, not heroic in tone, but quiet at first. A ripple, then a tremor. A man, Spartacus. His name might stir images already, of defiance, of broken chains, of gladiators rising in the arena with clenched fists. But step back, calm the noise, strip away the theatre and the myth, and meet him as he was, a Thracian, possibly born in the borderlands of what is now Bulgaria or northern Greece, a soldier, captured by Roman forces, a prisoner of war, sold as property. He was not born a slave, but he became one, and once you entered that world, returning was almost impossible. Spartacus was sold to a gladiator school in Capua, a town south of Rome. The training schools, known as ludi, were not just centres of combat education, they were prisons, harsh, confined, and closely monitored. The men trained there were valuable commodities, their bodies, their blood, a form of entertainment for Roman citizens. He would have woken in a stone cell, trained in heat, fought with wooden swords until his muscles remembered how to move. Meals would have been meagre, injuries frequent. Each man around him, another slave, another man broken down and reforged for violence. Yet he was not alone. Spartacus trained with others, men who had lived through war, Gauls, Germans, Midians. The school may have tried to erase their pasts, but it could not erase their memories. And among them, the whispers began, of escape, of revolt. In 73 BCE, those whispers turned to action. Accounts vary. Some say 70 men broke out using kitchen tools. Others claim it was closer to 200. But what matters is that they succeeded. They overwhelmed the guards. They raided local armories. And they fled to Mount Vesuvius, not yet infamous for fire and ash, but still steep, wild, and difficult to reach. Rome dismissed them at first. Just another slave disturbance. There had been others after all, the so-called servile wars in Sicily. But this was different. Spartacus and his men didn't scatter. They organised, they recruited, they trained. Others joined, runaway slaves, disillusioned peasants, even some free poor. By some estimates, tens of thousands eventually followed him. A slave army. But what did Spartacus want? That question lingers. The sources, almost all Roman, tell us little. Was he trying to reach Thrace and freedom? Did he seek vengeance, justice, or merely survival? Whatever the reason, he proved himself not just a fighter but a tactician. He defeated multiple Roman detachments sent to crush the rebellion. He used the land to his advantage. He avoided pitched battles unless favourable, and always he kept moving. His forces swelled, and for a time he controlled large swathes of southern Italy. Roman senators grew uneasy. Rome had underestimated him. But unity among the rebels was never perfect. Different factions wanted different things. Some wanted to march on Rome itself. Others sought only escape. Spartacus reportedly opposed the attack on the capital, knowing well that they could not hold it. So the movement turned south again, toward the sea, towards Sicily. The plan perhaps was to cross the water and vanish into the wider Mediterranean. But fate intervened, or betrayal. The pirates they sought passage with disappeared. The army was stranded, and Rome, now truly alarmed, sent its answer. Marcus Licinius Crassus. Crassus, a wealthy and ambitious senator, had no interest in letting Spartacus become a legend. He imposed discipline on his troops, harsh discipline. He reinstated the ancient punishment of decimation, executing 1 in 10 of any unit that fled or failed. Then he built a wall. Yes, a wall, across the narrow peninsula at Rhegium to trap Spartacus and his forces, a barrier of ditches and fortifications, a slow squeeze. Spartacus broke through once. He led his men in desperate charges, but the tide was turning. In 71 BCE, on an open battlefield in Lucania, the slave army made its final stand. They were outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and by the end of the day they were surrounded. Spartacus is said to have fought to the death, charging directly into the Roman ranks. His body was never found. Whether he fell in the first wave or the last, no one knows. The aftermath was brutal. Crassus ordered the crucifixion of over 6,000 captured slaves. Lining the Appian Way, the road that led to Rome, mile after mile, a forest of crosses, a message. Not just to rebels, but to all who served without hope. And so Spartacus became legend. But legends are shaped by the needs of those who remember them. To Rome he was a threat defeated. To later revolutionaries he was a hero, a symbol of resistance. What did he really believe? We don't know. No writings remain, no speeches, no manifestos. Only the reports of Roman historians. Men who called him brave but dangerous. His story survives because it frightened those in power, and perhaps that is enough. As you drift deeper into thought, imagine that rebel camp at night. The fires dim, the men around them whispering in a dozen languages, some dreaming of home, others expecting death. They knew the odds, but they still fought. The rebellion failed, but it burned bright enough to be remembered. Not as a victory, but as a rupture, a reminder that even the most silent and broken lives can, under pressure, rise. Now, we turn from fire and rebellion toward mystery, toward the countless voices lost entirely to time. W. Let the clash of swords fade. Let the shouting crowds, the galloping hooves, the crackling of campfires all dissolve into stillness. We are no longer at war. We are not in revolt. We are walking through what remains, quiet stones, faint traces, gaps where names should be. Because for all we know about Roman emperors, consuls and orators, we know almost nothing about the people who did most of the work, the Roman slaves. We know they existed in vast numbers, that they harvested grain in Sicily, that they mined silver in Spain, that they served wine in Carthage. But how many were there really? And why do they seem to have vanished so completely? Imagine now a Roman street, busy, noisy, sunlit, vendors shouting, carts rattling, children running. Among the free citizens are others, quiet, careful, observant. These are the slaves. Some carry jugs, some sweep thresholds, others wait by their master's door. They're everywhere, but rarely named, rarely counted. Ancient records were not made for them. Census counts listed slaves only as property, sometimes as numbers within a household, not individuals. Legal documents referred to them in vague terms: servus unus, one slave, or servi plurus, several slaves. Historians estimate that during the late Republic and early Empire, slaves made up between 15% and 40% of the population, depending on region. In Rome itself, that number may have been even higher. A household of modest means might own 2 or 3 slaves. A wealthy senator might own hundreds. Yet these numbers, though large, are shadows, approximations. The actual people are gone, their names forgotten, their stories for the most part never recorded. Occasionally we find fragments, a tombstone in a dusty cemetery. To Livia, a loyal maid who served with dignity. A potter's mark stamped into a tile, made by Felix, a slave of Gaius. A scratched message on a wall. I, Hermeros, was here. I miss my home. These small traces are precious, but they are rare. Most slaves were buried in mass graves unnamed, or not buried at all. Their labour built cities, but their identities were lost in the mortar. Archaeologists search for clues. A shovel digs into compacted soil, a fragment of chain, a worn comb, a child's doll. These objects whisper, but they do not explain. We find slave quarters in villas, tight windowless rooms behind kitchens. In Pompeii, plaster casts show bodies frozen in time, including slaves clutching the children they once cared for. In mines, we find tools too small for adults, hinting at child labour. In fields, we find nothing at all, just rows of furrows once worked by exhausted hands. Some scholars suggest there may have been up to 10 million slaves at Rome's height. Others caution that we simply cannot know. What we do know is that slavery was not a marginal phenomenon. It was structural. It touched every part of Roman life: agriculture, construction, education, medicine, and war. Some slaves were Greek tutors or physicians, literate, cultured, able to quote poetry. Others were shepherds or mill workers dying young and unknown. The gulf between them was wide, but legally they were all the same. Res, a thing. Even manumission, the act of freeing a slave, was complicated. A freed slave became a libertus, but only partially free. They often remained tied to their former master, now their patron. They owed services, respect and loyalty, and their children, only they would be fully free. We find tombs built by freedmen who became wealthy merchants. Their statues show them dressed in Roman garb, proudly inscribed with their names. But they are the exception, not the rule. What we rarely find is emotion, what it felt like to be born into slavery, to lose your name, to hear Latin as a foreign tongue, to wonder whether the person next to you is a friend or an informant. The written record is silent on this. Roman authors occasionally mention slaves, but as background. Pliny the Elder speaks of them as useful, Cicero compares them to tools, Seneca muses on their humanity but continues to own them. Even sympathetic voices like the Stoic philosophers rarely question the institution itself. There is no Roman abolition movement, no uprising that changed the law. Slavery continues century after century, reshaping but never disappearing. It wanes as the empire decays, not by reform, but by economic collapse and changing labour systems. And so, the memory fades. The names vanish from ledgers, the tools rust, the walls crumble, and in their place we are left with questions. How many lives passed unseen? How many hands built monuments we still admire? How many children lived and died without being recorded at all? We do not know, we can only imagine. And that perhaps is the hardest truth of all. As you lie still, listening, imagine standing in a field outside Rome. The sun is warm, the grass is high. Beneath your feet are the worn foundations of a long-forgotten villa. The master's house is gone, the columns broken. But below, in what was once a cellar, someone once slept, someone once worked, someone once waited for a day that would never change. They are not in the history books, but they were real. And with that, we leave behind the forgotten and return to the remembered. The masters, the rulers, the pampered elite who floated on top of it all. Let the world tilt now. Let the stone floors give way to marble, the stale air to incense, the rough wool to soft linen. From the cellar to the atrium, from the silence of slavery to the slow, measured confidence of privilege. Imagine yourself now not as a slave, but as the one for whom slaves labour, a Roman senator. The morning begins not with cold but comfort. You do not wake to shouting but to the soft rustle of sandals. A servant gently draws back the curtain. The first light filters through the painted shutters. You rise from a couch, not a mat, with a yawn, not a flinch. The air is scented with olive oil and fresh bread. A slave has already prepared your garments, a tunic of fine Egyptian linen and a fresh toga pura, folded just so. It takes help to put on properly, yards of cloth arranged in precise layers. You don't dress yourself. That would be unseemly. You step into your atrium. The mosaic floor is cool beneath your feet. Around you, household slaves are already at work. Some sweep, some fetch water, others serve breakfast. You greet none of them. Their presence is expected, their silence normal. Your morning begins with salutatio, the receiving of clients. These are not friends, they are lower status citizens who depend on your favour. They arrive early, lining your courtyard, some hopeful, others resigned. You nod, exchange pleasantries, perhaps offer advice or a coin. It is a performance of status, mutual obligation veiled in ritual. Afterward, you might stroll through your private garden or recline in the library. You don't read yourself unless it suits you. A slave reads aloud, Cicero maybe, or Homer in Greek. You listen, sipping watered wine, perhaps dictating letters or debating philosophy with another senator who's come to visit. Around midday, you bathe. The bathhouse is more than a place to clean, it is a sanctuary, a stage, and a social hub. You begin in the apoditerium, undressing with the help of an attendant, then into the tepidarium, the warm room, where steam loosens the joints. From there to the caldarium, the hot bath, where sweat drips from your skin. Slaves bring oils, scrape your body with a strigil, and fan you gently. You end in the frigidarium, plunging into cold water. It is brisk, invigorating. You emerge refreshed. Clean and relaxed, you return home, or perhaps to the Senate house. If it's a day of business, you don your senatorial sandals and take your place in the Curia Julia, debating laws, or more often, listening as the powerful few speak at length while the others wait for their cue to agree. Lunch is light, bread, cheese, olives, a fig or two, more wine. The evening is the heart of your day. You host a cenna, a dinner party. Your triclinium, the dining room, is richly decorated with coloured marble, bronze lamps and a carved ceiling. Guests recline on couches, slaves circulate with trays, honey dormice, stuffed dates, roasted fish. Dishes are elaborate and symbolic, designed to impress, not just feed. You eat with your fingers, delicately. Between courses you talk of politics, of literature, of gladiators and taxes and omens in the stars. Music plays softly, perhaps a girl plucking a lyre, or a boy piping a slow tune. After dinner, someone recites a poem, another performs a comedic verse. The wine flows. Not too much, you're no common drunkard, but enough to ease the mood. You laugh, but never too loudly. You debate, but never with someone who matters more than you. Your slaves are everywhere, clearing plates, pouring wine, standing by in silence. Their presence is the frame of your evening, unnoticed unless something goes wrong. Eventually the guests depart. You withdraw to your private chamber. Another slave undresses you, folds your garments, prepares your bed. You might read or pray or simply lie back, listening to the hush of fountains outside the window. You fall asleep without fear. There is no whip, no night patrol. You will wake when you choose, to another day of control, of ritual, of comfort, and you will never think to question the system that sustains you. Because to be a Roman senator is to believe that order is natural and hierarchy divine. You do not ask what it costs to live this way. You do not need to. You dine while others serve. You speak while others stay silent. Your name will be carved into marble. Theirs will not. But every brick in your villa, every stitch in your tunic, every drop of wine in your cup came from hands that history did not keep. This contrast between the served and the serving is the structure of Rome, a machine powered by thousands, maintained for the benefit of a few. Even your death will be different. Yours will be public, eulogized, a procession with flutes and masks and marble. Theirs will be quiet, forgotten, a grave without a stone or no grave at all. So as you drift, let this image linger. Not in judgment, but in awareness. A villa on a hill. A man reclines on a couch dictating a letter. Below in the kitchen, someone is washing the plate from which he just ate. In the fields, someone is trimming vines for next year's harvest. In the mines, someone is breaking rock to finance tomorrow's feast. All of them Romans, but only one of them free. And now, as we leave behind both the silence of the slave and the comfort of the senator, we bring the story to a close. And now, as the lamps dim and the voices of the past fall quiet, we return, slowly, gently, from the world of ancient Rome. We have walked its streets, but not as tourists. Not in the footsteps of emperors or generals. We have stepped softly in the shadows, in kitchens, in fields, in mines, in corridors where sandals were worn thin, where backs bent low, where names were seldom spoken. We began with a single day, a Roman slave's day, a rhythm of labour and fear, the quiet scraping of stone, the hiss of hot coals, the muffled creak of worn ropes, the soft clatter of chipped plates, the pattern of existence when you belong to someone else. Then we followed the spark, Spartacus and his rebellion. Not a legend shouted across time, but a man, tired of chains, surrounded by others just as weary. They did not win, but they dared to try, and history, however reluctantly, remembered them. We searched for the forgotten, for those without gravestones or records, the ones who built Rome, whose hands lifted stones and stirred pots and buried the dead. We listened for them in the gaps, in the silence between lines, in the worn edges of broken tiles and fragments of tombs. They are there, just beyond reach. And finally we ascended, into marble halls, scented baths and dinner parties where voices carried lightly over wine and honeyed figs. We saw what luxury looked like, its softness, its distance, its dependence on the unseen work of others, the weightless lives of those whose comforts were underwritten by endless toil. This is the balance of the Roman world, a civilization admired for its roads, laws and architecture, but beneath it all, a structure supported by servitude, not unlike others in history, not unique, but enduring and instructive, because history does not speak equally for all. It favours the literate, the powerful, the victorious. But even in sleep, even in silence, the others were there, The cooks, the water carriers, the arena cleaners, the nurses, the miners, the children born into work, the rebels, the forgotten. And tonight we remembered them. So now let your thoughts drift. Let the clatter of the villa fade. Let the dust settle over the training yard. Let the fields rest, the mines go quiet. The last candles burn low in the atrium. You're no longer in Rome. You are here, safe, warm, free. Let that contrast wrap around you like a blanket. The past is still there, just a breath away. But for now, you can let it go. You've seen enough for one night. Sleep well.